have a family account book on the second shelf of my study. Beige cardboard cover, the corners gone soft, the spine taped twice. It was started by Bridget Mulligan in 1903 in a Lawrenceville row house, and her daughter Mary O'Connor kept it going until 2009. One book, two women, 106 years of household accounts when it came to me. I'm going to read you the inside of it. Mary handed me the photocopy in 1998. She had made it for me on the parish photocopier at St. Augustine, page by page, 400 pages. A Saturday she gave up to do it. She said, "My daughter Eileen will get the original. You will get the work. I want someone who understood Patrick." Patrick was her husband, Pennsylvania Railroad brakeman, 1939 to 1976. 37 years, one paycheck, 5 children, and in the middle of all that, the decade I want to take you into tonight, the 1960s, when Mary and Patrick paid off their Lawrenceville row house on that one railroad wage and turned the mortgage paper into ash in the kitchen sink on a Tuesday evening in March 1965. That is the answer the title promised you. 25 Money Rules. American couples in the 1960s, mortgage-free, single paycheck. I am going to give them to you, 1 through 25, in the order Mary kept them. Not the order a finance book would put them in, the order a Lawrenceville kitchen put them in. But before I read you the page where Mary wrote the line about the mortgage burning, and before I number the 25 rules she and her mother kept across that book, I need you to understand the house I am about to take you into, the kitchen with the railroad clock above the sink, the parish 3 blocks down the hill, the neighborhood where every adult man on the street worked one job and every woman ran one budget, and every September 1 new pair of shoes per child arrived on the same Saturday morning. The 1960s looked the way they did because of habits like these. Take them away, and the decade collapses. Stay with me. I am going to read this slowly because Mary read it slowly, and her mother before her read it slower still. Tell me, in the comments, whose account book do you have somewhere in your house? Whose envelope system did your mother run on a Friday night at the kitchen table? Tell me her neighborhood, and tell me her name. I read every one. We are reading a woman together tonight. Pull up a chair. It was a Sunday afternoon in the autumn of 1981. Mary O'Connor was 60 years old. Patrick had been gone 2 years, lung cancer, 1979, age 60. I sat across from her at the kitchen table on Fisk Street in Lawrenceville. The Allegheny County visiting nurse rotation had put me at her door every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, and she had quietly, somewhere in the second year, added a Sunday visit that was not on any chart. A Sunday I came for the book. She turned the page that day to a column from October of 1963. She tapped a number in pencil, $22.40, the weekly grocery total for a family of 7. She said, that was a good week. I had a chicken from the parish raffle. Then she turned the page back to 1928, to a column in her mother Bridget's hand, and tapped a number there. $4.10, a week of groceries in the same kitchen for the same family, minus 35 years. She said, my mother stretched it then. I stretched it later. The book is the same book. The hand changed. The book is the same book. I have thought about that sentence for 30 years. Bridget Mulligan started the account book in 1903, the year after she married. She came up from County Kerry in 1898 at age 18 and lived in Lawrenceville her whole American life. She kept writing in the book for over 70 years until she could not see well enough to hold the pencil, at which point Mary took the book onto her own kitchen table and continued it without missing a Friday. Two women, the same book, 106 years. Mary called it the family book. She did not call it a budget. She did not call it a ledger. She called it the book, the way you would call your house, your house. Inside the book, on the inside cover, in Bridget's hand, in green ink that had faded to brown, was a list of 25 lines. Bridget had written them across the years, added to them, scratched some out, refined the wording. Mary inherited the list and added 3 of her own and crossed out 2 that no longer applied after 1933, when the FDIC arrived. The list as Mary kept it through the 1960s was 25 lines. She called them the habits. I am going to call them rules tonight, only because the title told me to. Mary would have said habits. The difference matters. A rule is a thing you obey. A habit is a thing you become. I have to confess something here before I read them to you. The first time I read the list, in 1998, sitting at Mary's kitchen table with the photocopy in my hand, I came to one of the lines, Rule 17, school shoes in September, and I laughed. Not unkindly. I laughed the way a younger woman laughs at a piece of charming antique furniture. I said something I am ashamed of. I said it sounded old-fashioned. Mary did not get angry. Mary was not the kind to get angry. She looked at me across the table and said, "Eleanor, my 5 children went to school every September of their lives with shoes that fit. None of them ever wore another child's hand-me-downs in front of a classroom." She said it without heat. Then she turned the page. I was 49 years old at the time. I had been a nurse for 23 years, and I still, in 1998, used a word like old-fashioned to describe the architecture that had carried 5 children through 5 Septembers across 19 years on a single railroad brakeman's wage. I learned that afternoon to stop using the word old-fashioned about other people's discipline. Somewhere in your life, maybe more than once, the truest thing inside you tried to speak, and you called it selfishness. You called it old-fashioned. You called it not the right time. Listen for it again tonight. That is what these pages are for. Now let me take you back to the 1960s. Patrick O'Connor worked the freight line out of the 26th Street yards as a brakeman. His weekly check was about $92 in 1960, $110 by 1965, $180 by the time he retired in 1976. 1 check, 1 household. Mary did not work outside the house in those years. Across the entire 1960s decade, the O'Connor household ran on Patrick's single railroad paycheck. There is a name for what these couples built. The historians call it the single-earner household. The economists call it the male breadwinner model. The women called it the paycheck. Singular, definite article. The one paycheck the week was built around. Friday afternoon Patrick brought it home, and Friday night Mary sat at the table with the account book and gave the week its shape. The paycheck was the river, the book was the bank. So, 25 money rules, the way Mary kept them. Rule 1. The Friday accounting. Every Friday after supper, Mary sat at the kitchen table with the book and recorded the gross, the deductions, the net. She allocated the net into the categories of the week before a single dollar was spent. She called it taking the week apart before it gets a chance to take itself apart. Patrick read the paper. The book was hers. Rule 2. The parish envelope first. Before groceries, before the gas bill, before anything, Mary set aside the parish envelope for Sunday. 50 cents a week in 1960, $1 by 1968. Mary said, "You do not give what is left over, because there is never anything left over." Rule 3. The mortgage payment second. The mortgage was $62.14 a month in 1960 on a house they bought for $8,900 in 1953 with the GI loan from Patrick's Army service. Mary paid it on the 3rd of every month. She walked it to the bank in person. The teller knew her name. Rule 4. The pantry weekly cap. Mary spent exactly $22 a week on groceries from 1960 through 1964, then raised it to $26 in 1965 and to $30 in 1968 as the children entered teenage years. She did not exceed the cap. She bought what was on sale and built the meals around what she got, not the other way round. Rule 5. The day of the week rule. Mary knew which Lawrenceville butcher cut prices on which day. Sciortino on Wednesday afternoon for chicken, the shop on Penn Avenue on Thursday for ground beef, the Italian grocer on Saturday at 4 for whatever vegetables would not survive the weekend. The map in her head was a map of when, not where. Rule 6. The School Shoes in September Fund. Starting the first week of January every year, Mary set aside $1.25 a week into an envelope marked September. By Labor Day each year, that envelope held about $60, which paid for 5 pairs of children's school shoes at the cobbler shop on Butler Street. 1 pair per child, every September, no exceptions. Rule 7. The funeral envelope, always full. Every household on Fisk Street kept a funeral envelope, enough cash on hand to bury an adult member of the family without going into debt. Mary's held $300 in 1960, $400 by 1965, $500 by 1970. She refilled it the week after any withdrawal. She said, "You do not die owing the parish." Rule 8. The Burial Society dues. On top of the funeral envelope, Mary paid the St. Augustine Catholic Burial Society, 15 cents a week per adult. The society pooled the dues across hundreds of households and paid the burial cost when a member died. 2 systems for the same risk. Redundancy was the architecture. You did not rely on one. There was another woman on Polish Hill in those same years, Halina Kowalska, widowed already, 6 surviving children, kept her household in 6 tin envelopes on a kitchen shelf instead of a single bound book. Halina and Mary never met. They were running, in 1963, parallel households on the same architecture, the parish on top, the mortgage second, the funeral envelope full, the school shoes set aside from January, in different languages. The columns lined up. The discipline was not Irish and was not Polish. It was the working-class American 1960s. A friend wrote to me last week to tell me her father was a Pennsylvania railroad brakeman in Altoona in the same years, and her mother counted out the school shoe envelope at the kitchen table every September. I did not invent any of this. Other women were reading from their own books too. And I want to give the system its honest credit and not flatten the men who lived inside it. Patrick built 3 of the kitchen cabinets in that house himself. He read every page of the account book, not to second-guess Mary, but because Mary asked him to. There were no monsters. There was a machine, and there were people inside it, and the people inside it built habits that let the machine keep them alive. Rule 9. The Sunday meal as the week's hinge. Sunday dinner was the largest meal of the week, a roast chicken, or on payday weeks, a small beef roast, and the leftovers structured Monday and Tuesday. The chicken became chicken and rice on Monday, and broth with potatoes on Tuesday. 3 days of meals from one Sunday cut. The book tracks the cost. Rule 10. The 4-recipe rule. Every chicken, every roast, every ham had to feed the family across 4 distinct meals. Mary planned the meals before she bought the meat. The 4th meal was almost always a soup. The bones went into the stock pot on Wednesday night and came back as soup on Thursday. Rule 11. The garden ledger. Mary and Patrick had a small backyard plot, 18 feet by 22 feet, that produced tomatoes, beans, lettuce, peppers, herbs from May through October. Mary tracked the dollar value of every vegetable they did not have to buy. In 1963, the garden saved them about $78 across the growing season. The garden was not a hobby. The garden was a line item. Rule 12. The mending Saturday. Every Saturday morning, Mary mended clothes, patched knees, re-sewed seams, replaced buttons, turned cuffs and collars. A pair of children's pants got patched twice before it became a younger sibling's pants. A pair of Patrick's work shirts went into the rag bin only after the collar was turned twice. The mending Saturday saved the clothing budget for school shoes and Sunday coats. Rule 13. The waiting week. Anything that was not strictly necessary, a new lamp, a kitchen tool, a coat that was not a school coat, had to sit on a written list for a full week before Mary would consider buying it. Most of the things on the list crossed themselves off by the end of the week. She said, most wants are not wants by Friday. Rule 14. The 13th payment trick. This is the one that built the mortgage burn. Patrick was paid weekly, 52 weeks a year. The mortgage was a monthly payment, 12 months a year. In 4 months out of the year, the months with 5 Fridays, Mary made an extra mortgage payment from the 5th Friday's check, which she had set aside the previous month. Across the year, that meant the O'Connors paid 13 monthly mortgage payments instead of 12. Across the life of a 30-year mortgage, that one extra payment a year retired the loan about 6 years early. They burned the mortgage paper in March 1965, 8 years ahead of the schedule the bank had drawn up in 1953. They had used the calendar against the loan. Rule 15. The roundup. Mary rounded every mortgage payment up to the nearest $5. The mortgage payment was $62.14 in 1960. She paid $65. The extra $2.86 a month went to principal. Across 12 years, that roundup alone took about 14 months off the loan. Combined with Rule 14, it was the engine of the early payoff. Rule 16. The raise rule. Whenever Patrick got a seniority raise on the railroad, and he got one every 2 to 3 years, Mary did not raise the household spending. She added the entire raise to the mortgage principal. The bank teller knew on the 3rd of every month for 10 years exactly what number Mary was going to bring in, and she watched the principal column shrink across the years as if she were watching her own house pay itself off too. Rule 17. The school shoes in September fund I have already mentioned at Rule 6. Mary listed it in the book twice, once under savings and once under children's needs. The book had a small redundancy of important items. The things that mattered got written down in 2 places so the columns reminded each other. Rule 18. The wedding fund per daughter. Mary had 2 daughters. From the year each daughter was born, Eileen in 1945, Margaret in 1949, Mary began a small wedding fund, 50 cents a week per daughter. By the time Eileen married in 1968, 23 years of 50 cents a week plus the savings bank interest had built $612, which covered the church, the parish hall rental, the cake, and the dress. Mary said no daughter of mine would go to her wedding day with her parents in debt. Rule 19. The Christmas envelope started in January. Every January 1st, Mary started a Christmas envelope, $1 a week, 52 weeks. By December, that envelope held $52, which covered every gift, every parish charity contribution, every Christmas Eve roast, and the New Year's Day open house. Christmas never went on credit. Christmas never went into the mortgage envelope. Rule 20. The medical envelope. Catastrophic illness was the great fear of every working-class household in the 1960s. Patrick had basic railroad health coverage from his union, but the coverage didn't cover everything. Mary kept a medical envelope, $2 a week, that paid for the dentist, the optometrist, the doctor visits the union didn't cover. When the children needed glasses, the envelope paid. When Patrick needed the back brace in 1967, the envelope paid. I want to give you the page where Mary wrote the line about the mortgage burning before I close out the last rules. The page is dated March 9th, 1965, a Tuesday. The line is 1 sentence. It says, "Paid the bank the last payment today, $68.40. The man at the bank stood up from his desk and shook Patrick's hand. We walked home together, came home, and burned the paper in the kitchen sink. The children watched. Patrick said, 'Now we work for ourselves.'" The line is in Mary's handwriting in pencil. There are no exclamation points. There are no underlines. It reads like every other line in the book, calm, full, accurate, undecorated. 12 years and 3 months from the day they signed the loan to the day they paid it off. Patrick was 46 years old. Mary was 44. The youngest child was 6. The oldest was 21. Rule 21. The widow contingency. Every household on Fisk Street had a widow contingency built into the budget. Mary's was a small life insurance policy on Patrick that paid out $3,000 on his death, plus the funeral envelope, plus the burial society payout, plus the paid-off house. The widow contingency assumed Patrick would die first. Railroad work was hard on a body. Mary built the contingency. She also hoped never to use it. She used it in 1979. Rule 22. The pension awareness. Patrick had a Railroad Retirement Board pension separate from Social Security. Mary read the Railroad Retirement Board statements every year. She knew by 1963 exactly what Patrick's pension would pay at age 62 and at age 65. She had the numbers in the back of the book. Patrick retired at 57 in 1976, which was earlier than the maximum, but the maximum no longer mattered because the mortgage was gone, the children were grown, and Patrick's body was tired. Knowing the numbers gave them permission to stop when stopping was right. Rule 23. The parish raffle as luck management. The parish raffled chickens, hams, and small cash prizes most Sundays. Mary bought one 50-cent ticket every Sunday for 30 years. Across the years, she won about 8 chickens, 2 hams, and once, in 1961, $12 in cash. The ticket was not gambling. The ticket was a sustained small bet on the parish ecosystem. 50 cents a week was both a small charity and a small lottery. The cumulative value across 30 years almost exactly equaled the cumulative cost of the tickets. She said, "Even money is good odds when the money goes to the parish either way." Rule 24. The neighbour calendar. Mary kept a small calendar in the back of the book of which Fisk Street family was due to lose a wage that month. The railroad layoffs were seasonal, the mill schedules predictable, the cancer diagnoses sadly predictable too. When a Fisk Street household entered a lean week, Mary brought over a casserole, a loaf of bread, a small amount of cash in an unmarked envelope. The casseroles cycled across the street in both directions across the decades. Mary received them too, 3 times in the 1950s when a child was sick, twice in the 1960s when Patrick was on layoff. The calendar was the unwritten mutual aid that ran underneath the union and the parish and the burial society. Rule 25. The pencil and paper rule. Mary kept the book in pencil. She did not use a pen except when she copied a final figure into the back of book annual summary. She said, "Pencil is honest. You can correct a mistake." Bridget had kept the original book in pencil. That is the 25. I want to close where I started. The kitchen on Fisk Street, the railroad clock above the sink. Mary at the table in 1981, the book open to the page dated March 9th, 1965. Patrick already 2 years gone. The mortgage paid off 16 years before that, the funeral envelope used once, the burial society having delivered, the widow contingency having held. Mary lived in the paid-off house for 30 more years after Patrick died. She died in 2009 at the age of 88. The house at 2811 Fisk Street stayed in the family. Her daughter Eileen lives there now, 60 years old, the 3rd generation of women under that roof. The account book sits on Eileen's kitchen table on Friday nights. Eileen continues it. She told me last spring she has not added any new rules. She said her mother's 25 were enough. Halina Kowalska on Polish Hill paid off her row house in 1967, 2 years after Mary. The same calendar trick, the same roundup, the same raise rule. Halina's 6 envelopes did the work Mary's account book did. The architecture was identical. Her daughter-in-law brought me Halina's notebook in 1991. It sits on the shelf 2 books over from the photocopy of Mary's book. If you have a mortgage and the calculator people tell you it cannot be paid off early on one income in this economy, listen to me carefully. The calculator people are not wrong about the arithmetic. They are wrong about the architecture. Mary and Patrick did not pay off their house because they were lucky or because the 1960s were easy. The 1960s were not easy. Patrick worked outdoors in Pittsburgh winters for 37 years, and it killed him at 60. They paid off the house because they ran 25 overlapping small disciplines every week for 12 years and 3 months without ever skipping a Friday at the kitchen table. They are gone now. What they knew is yours.